Welcome to Figure It Out episode 1. My name is Max. I will be your podcast host for the duration of this podcast series. This podcast is focused on career-related interviews. So I will be talking to a bunch of folks in different careers, in different levels in their careers, and asking them a bunch of questions about how they got there, what their day-to-day looks like, what their week-to-week looks like, what they love about their jobs, what they don't like about their jobs, what they would recommend for younger people just getting started in those jobs, to hopefully give you guys some advice. And if you are interested in any of those careers, hopefully you will get a sense of what that day-to-day is like and get a better idea of if you really want to do that or not. And even if it's not a career that you're particularly interested in, I hope that we ask some good questions that will allow you to schedule your own interviews, whether on a podcast or not, but schedule your own interviews so that you can ask some of these questions to people in careers that are of interest to you and learn what that day-to-day is like and figure out if that's something that you actually want to do. This goes along with my YouTube series called Figure It Out, very creative naming, where I am putting myself through a mini gap year experience. So I took essentially a career test, found 10 different careers that I believe would be a good fit for me. I am interviewing a person out of each one of those, or more than one person per career. And then after that, deciding and narrowing it down to 3 different things that I will job shadow or intern for 2 weeks to figure out essentially what I would like to do. I believe that there is no greater teacher than experience, that you can go to school forever, learn a bunch of classroom stuff, do a bunch of online learning, but doing it in real life is the only thing that is going to teach you if you actually like to do that thing or not. I've taken hundreds of classes that I think, oh man, I would really love this, like graphic design. Oh, this is really cool. I really like this. And then you get into the actual field and it is absolutely nothing like you thought it would be. So that is generally the focus of the podcast, generally the focus of the YouTube channel, and hopefully helping some young people or adults, that are looking to do a pivot in their life, figure out what they actually might want to do with their lives. So that is generally about me, about what you can expect from this podcast. We are going to talk a little bit about my story here and kind of go through how I got here. I have had a little bit of I don't know that I would call it tumultuous because it's been great, but a little bit of a zigzaggy career so far. So I think that it is important to hear some of those zigzags from people who are a little bit further along than you, or they're in a place where you want to be, because it can be really easy to try to draw a straight line and say, oh, they graduated college, they got this job, and then they have the job that I want. Usually it is not that. Usually people don't have a job at all related to the career or to the degree that they got in school. So you will probably hear that from a bunch of the hosts here. I can certainly attest to it myself. So that's kind of the general gist of what's going to happen here. Some general advice is getting as much experience as you can and finding someone you want to be when you grow up and spending as much time with them as possible. So if during your interview process, which I hope you do, if you find someone that you're like, wow, I really like this person's life, try to spend as much time with them as possible and try to figure out how they got there. A couple of caveats to that. If you find someone who is generationally wealthy and you want their life because they are generationally wealthy, unfortunately, spending time with them probably is not going to make you generationally wealthy. Unless, of course, you spend so much time with them that they leave you in their will, and then you might be all set. But generally speaking, you want to spend time with somebody who got to where they are through their own hard work and determination, and they can help you do the same. All right. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Both of my parents were small business owners when I was growing up. My dad was a 3rd-generation small business owner. So he owned a sporting goods store, jackets, skis, bikes, all that kind of stuff. So his parents, his grandparents started it. his parents ran it, and then he took it over from his parents, and he ran that for his entire life. So that's what he did. He shut it down when I was a freshman in high school, which would have been, I think, 2010. Somewhere around there. He decided that he didn't want to do it anymore, and he didn't want to wait for me to graduate college to decide that if I wanted to do it or not. He felt a little bit forced into it by his parents. He didn't really have much of a choice of what he was going to do, so he didn't want to do that to me. So he basically was like, or my older sister, he basically was like, I'm just shutting it down. I'm not selling it. I'm not getting rid of it. I'm not, waiting for one of you guys to decide you want to take it over. I'm shutting it down. But he didn't really know anything in his life other than small business ownership. That's what he did. My mom owned a small bakery and catering company, and her father owned a car dealership as well as a couple of gas stations when she was growing up. So she actually worked in corporate. She worked at Shopko as a fashion buyer, which essentially means she would travel all around the world and say, hey, we want, as Shopko, we want to buy 1 million of these socks or these gloves or whatever. So she went to school for fashion design, and that's what she ended up doing. And then when my sister was born, I think, she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. She was like, all right, I'm done hanging up the corporate career situation. And then a little bit after that, there was a small bakery in my hometown that was for sale, and she decided that she wanted to do that. So she did that. Grew it, moved it, grew the catering quite a bit. So I spent a bunch of time as a little kid helping out with catering, doing the dishes. I peeled a lot of shrimp as a little kid. She would bring home shrimp in like these 5-gallon buckets, and she would set them down in front of me and say, get to peeling, kid. So she put a TV in our kitchen when we remodeled, I think specifically for that reason. And to this day, I don't eat seafood because I think that I just peeled way too many shrimp in my lifetime. So, a little bit about kind of the way I grew up. I didn't really know parents who complained about bosses. I didn't really know what that was like. Everything, when you're a small business owner, everything rests on your shoulder. Yes, you get a lot of freedom, but you also have a ton of responsibility, especially when you have employees that rely on you to get paid. If the business doesn't make money and you can't pay those employees, you're kind of SOL. So I grew up with that mentality, essentially. In 2016, I moved to Minnesota from Green Bay. I like that I have to have notes for my own life story here. And I was going to a community college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I started working at an escape room of all places. I just went to one and said they were hiring, and I was like, no way are you going to pay me to lock people in rooms? But sure enough, they did, and it actually paid pretty well, and it was super fun. So I was going to school for welding at the same time and then working at an escape room. And during that time, I got to meet our engineer who built basically all the rooms, a lot of the puzzles, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I think I want to do that. That seems like pretty much the coolest job of all time. That sounds great. And so I talked to him a bunch and was like, okay, well, what did you go to school for? What did you do? And he went to school for something called integrated engineering, which I think is pretty unique to Minnesota. I actually don't know. But essentially what I know about the program is that instead of going deep dive into like mechanical engineering or materials engineering or anything like that, it is kind of like a spread out, like you get to learn a little bit more about a bunch of different types of engineering rather than deep diving into one. And particularly the program that he did was very project based. So the last 2 years, I believe, of his program, he had to find a business that wanted a specific project done. He had to do a lot of the budgeting, a lot of the project management, like all that kind of stuff. Think about like a super scaled up version of like what an Eagle Scout does to become an Eagle Scout. So that's what he did. And I spent a bunch of time with him, and I was like, I don't know, maybe that's what I want to do. So started working towards, okay, I'm going to get a welding degree, which I'm super grateful that I got. It's a great skill to have. It taught me a lot. And then I'll go on to be an engineer to get into this program. So I started making steps towards that. And during that process, I discovered that I was going to have to do a ton of math, which I was willing to do. It was like, hey, you got to get to Calc 4. I think when I was in high school, I I got past algebra, I got past geometry, and whatever one is beyond that I got past, but that was it. I stopped taking math classes basically as soon as I could. So I discovered I was gonna have to do a ton of math. And I was like, okay, well, I can handle that. And then after that, I talked to this engineer for a while, and I was like, well, okay, you get to do this, but what are the people that you graduated with, what do they do? And the two careers that he mentioned was designing Amazon warehouses. So they would like design the most efficient way to lay out an Amazon warehouse, essentially. And then the other one was designing plumbing for apartment buildings, and kind of same idea of like, okay, how can we arrange this plumbing to be as efficient as possible? And I was like, well, that sounds horrible. I do not want to do that at all. Maybe I'm out on this engineering thing. Like, A, I don't want to do this math, and B, like, what are the chances that I get a job as cool as yours? Like, I was like, that's pretty slim, right? If you graduated with however many other people and you're the only one that has a job that I think is cool, then that degree probably isn't for me. So then after a while, I was like, okay, well, maybe I want to be in charge of something. Maybe I want to have a little bit more freedom in my life. Maybe I want to follow in my parents' footsteps and own something. And I was like, oh, well, I could start a welding shop, maybe do something small like that. But as I got further in with this escape room company, I got to know the founder relatively well. His name's Matt, and this was his third or fourth business, I think. He was pretty young. I think he was like early to mid 30s when I first met him. And he got to live like the dream. Like after talking to him, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like you get to travel a ton. You get to just kind of decide what you want to build next. You know, as this thing gets more successful, you can decide to build upon that or to start something new. And you really have basically complete control of your time and deciding what you want to do with your life. So after that, I kind of decided like, okay, this is more the road I want to go down. So during this time, I was still going to school full time. I had switched to I got my welding degree and then switched to just getting more general so I could transfer to a 4-year university at some point in time. And at that point, I was also managing 2 escape room branches as well as the adventure park. So kind of in a, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 mile radius, we had 2 escape room branches, and then we had an outdoor adventure park that had like paintball, airsoft, archery tag, camping, stuff like that. So I was doing all of that and going to school full time. So it was a little stressful, but I got through it. It was super fun. It was definitely like one of the most fun times of my life. And this was in 2020. So I'd spent a few years working at the escape room and kind of working my way up. And then 2020 happened. I very distinctly remember so we're in Minnesota. So the adventure park closes in the winter, and we had put all the stuff in our corporate office, and then we were like, okay, let's load it all up to get it back out to the park so we can open back up again. We had just finished loading the van with basically all the stuff that we needed. I went back inside to say, okay, we're gonna load up and get ready to go. I'll be back in a couple hours with the van, whatever. And the corporate leadership at that point, which included Matt, turned to me and said, unload it, put it all back. We're closing down for at least 2 weeks. This pandemic has gotten, we had a bunch of escape room branches across the Midwest. And it was just like from east to west coast, essentially just like shut down one by one. And so it finally had gotten bad enough around us that it was like, okay, the official word from the government is like, you gotta shut down. You can't operate. So we unloaded everything. I, along with, pretty much everyone else, ended up being furloughed and was just kind of hanging out. And I had quite the identity crisis. I was like, I can't sit here and do nothing. I'm going to go crazy. I need to be doing something to like help. Like this is out of control. The state of the world in healthcare was obviously horrible and scary, and nobody knew what was going on or what was going to happen. And I was like, I can't just sit here and do nothing. So I was very lucky to kind of know a friend of a friend who worked in healthcare. I obviously zero experience in healthcare. But I had a ton of management experience at that point in my life, and I thought I was pretty good at it. I was managing those 3 branches. I think at one point I probably had 35 or so, 11 or 12 at each location, part-time employees. So I was like, I can totally manage people. And so I knew someone worked at what's called a federally qualified healthcare facility. And basically what that means is that you can go in and there's a sliding scale. So depending on your income, you might pay more or less. And that is backed by the federal government. So they were like, oh, well, we need a new front end manager. And I was like, oh, I can do that. Front end manager, no big deal, right? Yeah, that was an adventure. So suddenly I was in charge of 12 union full-time employees. I had never worked with a union before, and I had never had a full-time employee before. So that was quite the adventure, quite the learning curve. A lot of people around me congratulated me on like, oh, you finally got a real job. Like, okay, you're done in, entertainment, and you're done working nights and weekends. You have a job that has very clear steps up, right? Like if you want to really get into this, like there are very clear steps for you to move up, either in healthcare, in that specific facility, in a different facility, whatever it might be. And I was like, okay, great. Like I did it, I guess. Very excited about that. It took maybe a month or 2 to realize that I absolutely hated it. I didn't feel like I was contributing to helping at all, even though I was helping run our COVID clinic, like our COVID testing site. I was like directly helping run that. It just didn't feel like I was. I just didn't feel like I was helping. I didn't really feel like I was connecting with any of our patients or any of my employees. I just felt like I was doing a bang up job of it, and I really didn't like it. And at that point, I kind of discovered and thought to myself, like, all right, if you had just volunteered first, you probably would have figured out really quickly that you don't like this. You don't like working in a 9-to-5 office. As silly as it sounds, I hated like having to dress up for work. I did not like having to be business casual or being told what I could and couldn't wear to work. And managing full-time employees was also something that I discovered that like they were all older than me. I didn't have a single employee that was younger than I was. And I didn't like that. I wanted to manage people that were eventually going to move on from me. I think that's what I really discovered, is that I wanted to be a launching pad for what they wanted to do next in their life, not their retirement job, which for a lot of people, like in that job, I felt very confident and feel very confident still that that's probably the job that they are going to retire from. And that was just not something that I was super interested in. So I kind of slogged through that, and I realized that that was my mistake, right? I should have done more research. I should have talked to more people. I should have just volunteered, for heaven's sake. Like this could have been, I could have avoided a lot of this, rough weather in my life. And so I was searching for new jobs. I was like, well, I don't, maybe I would really like marketing. Maybe that's something that I would really enjoy. I don't know the first thing about marketing, but I thought maybe I would love it. I think I got Google Ads certified or something like that. And was like, oh, I can now get any marketing job. Wrong. And so I slogged through that for, I'm going to say like a year and a half. And at that point, I graduated with my associate's degree from the community college I'd been going to. I didn't even know. They were like, hey, you can't sign up for any more classes. You are like, you're done. Like you graduated, you have your degree. You need to either like, do what you're doing, do whatever you want. But you don't really need to take any more classes here. So at that point, I was like, well, okay. A couple years ago, I wanted to be Matt, right? I wanted to be the owner of this company. Well, what did he do? So it turns out he went to school for entrepreneurship. I didn't even know that was a degree you could get. So I started doing a little bit of research into that, and ended up finding St. Thomas, the St. Thomas School of Entrepreneurship, which is local here to St. Paul, Minnesota. Applied, got in. I was like, okay, well, this is great. And then ended up saying, well, I can't, I could figure out how to go to a community college part-time or full-time, but, I had full-time credits, but it was really easy to do online classes, night classes, all that kind of stuff. Like community colleges do a great job of working with whatever schedule you have. 4-year universities are not so much like that unless you're taking like a master's level program or something like that. But generally, the St. Thomas Entrepreneurship Program was like, this is for a full-time student that is not really doing anything else. Maybe they're working part-time. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go back to school. I had never stopped going to school, but I'm going to really like do school for real. So that's what I did. I was 24 maybe at the time. So I was way older than all of my classmates, and I had to take some like first year classes. So I was with like some 17, 18-year-olds, which not a bad thing at all. It was just interesting. And I ended up working in St. Thomas's Career Development Center. At the time, I don't remember what it was called. They've restructured a few times since then. And I started talking with students about my job was essentially to like, hey, let's look at, like, I'll help you with your resume. I'll help you with a cover letter. I will help you with a job search. I'll help you with an internship search. And in having those conversations with students, I discovered that a lot of them were doing an internship in whatever field between their junior and senior year. So tons of them were getting internships, which was great, but a lot of them were doing them kind of in that time. And then they were discovering like, oh, hey, I really like the classwork, but I actually don't like the work. So I actually don't like, doing the thing. What do I do now? And I was a student employee. I was like, I don't know. But it did help me realize that, okay, this maybe wasn't just a me problem. This might be kind of an everyone problem. So that was kind of my first tidbit of like, okay, maybe this isn't a Max problem. Maybe this is just kind of like a systematic issue. So I worked there for my first year, and taking my own advice was like, oh, I need to get an internship somewhere. Like I need to figure out what I want to do this summer to support myself financially, and also just like figure out what I want to do. So I found this private equity firm that owned a couple of escape rooms, and they also owned a couple of other like entertainment things. And I was like, oh, well, that kind of seems like a good cross section of things that, I would be interested in. Private equity is not super uncommon for an entrepreneurship student to get into, evaluating those kinds of deals, all that kind of stuff, all the spreadsheet stuff, which I happen to love. So, okay. So I basically cold emailed them, and I think I messaged the COO maybe on LinkedIn and just kind of explained the situation. I was like, hey, I have all this experience in entertainment. I have run escape rooms before. Like, yeah, generally speaking, I know what I'm doing. And it was supposed to be an internship. It turned into a full-time job. And they were like, hey, do you want to run our brand Pedal Pub for the summer? Pedal Pub is a party bike company where it's a giant bike. It's the ones in Minnesota are all human powered. So you have to pedal, you stop at a bar, you get a drink, and then you can have drinks while you're on the bike. So I was like, oh, sure, I'll do that. Like, yeah, why not? Seems kind of right up my alley of entertainment, all that kind of stuff. So I did that for a summer. I hated it. I really didn't like, I don't drink, so I didn't really like dealing with a lot of drunk people. And being in downtown Minneapolis was pretty stressful for me. It's a safe place. I never felt scared for myself, but I did feel scared for my employees occasionally. And just having 16 drunk adults on a bike in downtown Minneapolis just was a very high anxiety experience for me. So at that point, Matt had reached back out to me and basically said, hey, I'm working on this new concept. Are you interested? And I said, yes, I am very interested. So we met back up, and essentially he was like, oh, I'm working on this concept called Arcade Arena, which I had known about a little bit, but didn't know where he was at with it, since I had left. But essentially it's virtual reality without a headset. So you walk into a room, there's these giant walls that are all touchscreens. You have consoles in the back that are old school arcade controls. There's some good tech in there, so it knows where you are when you're physically in the room. And so he had essentially worked with an engineer, and they didn't create any of the technology, but they made it all work together. So, and then they had been custom making games for it, and he was ready to like really move forward with it. So he said, I know that you want a new shiny project to work on. I want you to work on this with me, but you have to run the adventure park while you do this. And I was kind of like, I've been there. I've done that. That's not new. That's not exciting. That's not challenging for me. But okay, if that's the terms of the job, that's the terms of the job. I want to do this other shiny thing with you. So fine. And so that's what I did. So it was September. The park closes down in November. So I kind of ran it for 2 months, and then we really focused heavily on the other brand. And in that time, Matt moved halfway across the country. So it was kind of like, all right, well, you're in charge of this part. He was doing a ton of like the sales and the marketing stuff from afar, everything that he could do. And then I was in charge of the park, and we had, at that point, we did have a physical location for Arcade Arena, so I was running that as well. And then fast forward a year, and then I graduated college. Who knew? Took me, I think overall, like start of college to end of college, it took me over 8 years. I was working full time during that whole time, but still, I like to say that I opposite Van Wildered my school experience, and that I made it take so long, not because I was partying, but because I was working so much. And then I really, at that point, started to fall in love with running Champion Valley, running the adventure park. And, the great thing about entrepreneurship, it is pretty much all challenge by choice. So you can choose to make it as easy as you want, or you can choose to make it as difficult as you want. So to me, that was the really fun part of, hey, I can really challenge myself here and do whatever I want to do. And that for me was very eye-opening to say, okay, you know what, I have essentially 150 acres of land at my disposal. Like, I can kind of do whatever I want with it. It started out as a paintball park. It doesn't necessarily have to be a paintball park. So don't worry, it's staying a paintball park for now. But just kind of like enlightening to think that way, to kind of, I'm going to call it like get out of a general manager mindset of like, okay, this is what we do day in and day out, and get into more of a CEO mindset of like, okay, this is what we do now, but what could we do? What changes could we make? What other things could we do? So then last year, Matt sent me an email and was like, you're the CEO of Champion Valley. I kind of rolled my eyes at him and was like, okay, whatever, dude. I do everything that a CEO would do anyway. And I have not been that wrong about anything in a very long time. Turns out, whole new challenge to grow the business. And I was at a conference about a month ago now, and I was hearing somebody speak, and she was talking about the responsibilities of the owner or the CEO or whoever's in charge, and the differences between that and a general manager or an employee. And that was really eye-opening for me. And she was kind of talking about like, oh yeah, like I take my general manager, or I take kind of some of my other part-time employees, and I put them in charge of marketing, or I put them in charge of social content creation, or I put them in charge of, XYZ thing. And in my mind, I was like, well, then what am I supposed to do? If they're all doing that, A, what am I supposed to do? And B, how do you pay them for that? Like, how do you get them to do that and then pay them and then show them a path of like, hey, you can work here full time, right? At the park, I'm the only full-time employee. And as far as I could tell, I was going to only ever be the only full-time employee. Like, there wasn't a great path of like, oh, we have an assistant manager position available, whatever. There wasn't anything like that. And she said it is your responsibility to grow the business so that you can give these people a path to continue working with you if they choose to do that. And that was really eye-opening for me of like, okay, if it's my responsibility, if I know that these people want that, they want to continue working with me, they want to do these things to help the business, it is my responsibility to grow the business enough to give them the opportunity to do that. And that was a really big mindset shift for me. And so that kind of leads us up to now, and discovering that the park, I have zero intention of leaving the park ever or not doing that. But I manage all these, I have almost exclusively teenage boys at this point in time. And that it's really eye-opening to discover like what they want to do with their lives, or how many of them just have no idea. So putting myself through this kind of like mini experience so I can show people and help them with figuring out what they want to do with their lives, and understanding that experience is the most important thing. And if you can't get experience in that thing, talking to people who have experience in that thing is second best. And then classroom learning is like number 10 on the list. Like there are a bunch of other things that you could do that would be more helpful probably than classroom learning. So that is what you can expect. That's a little bit of my story. I don't think I missed anything, but I probably did. And I don't know because I can't read my notes anyway, because I can't read my own handwriting. So that's a little Gen Z thing about me, is that I take all these physical notes. I can't read any of them. So that is the podcast. That's the story. That's my story. I look forward to some of the guests that we have coming up soon. I have a guide from the Boundary Water, so I'm super excited to talk to him. I have the president of the St. Paul Saints, super excited to talk to him. I've got 2 other nonprofit leaders lined up that I'm super interested to talk to both of them and figure out what their day-to-day looks like. So I hope you follow along. I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about myself. Sorry if that was a lot too much information about me. Join us on the next one. I have no idea what the release cadence is going to be. I have no idea when this is going to go up. I have no idea if I'm even going to release it. That's the best thing about podcast and content creation. This is a little pro tip for you, is that you can record and do anything you want, and you can just delete it. I could just delete this whole podcast and be like, wow, I never want that to see the light of day. It could happen. If you're hearing this, it didn't, but it could. You don't know how many takes I did of this. This could be my 100th recording.